But when I started writing, I learned that I still had a long way to go in terms of accepting and incorporating criticism. My husband, then my fiance, read the first draft of Olympia Heights, the Pantheon back in 2008. I was so proud of what I had done, finishing a 50,000-word manuscript filled with what I thought were pretty awesome ideas, but some things were unclear. There was a plot hole. The pacing had fallen into a rut of formulaic scenes. Somebody would have a dream, they would wake up, they would think about the dream, then they would go about their day. It needed a lot of work. It's really hard when you work hard to create something to have to do it over. It's why some of you resist the idea of writing rough drafts in your English class. You think, I already did this, why do I have to do it again? It's fine to do a hard thing. It's a lot more of a challenge to convince yourself to do it twice, or 3 times, or 4 times. Throwing away entire chapters that you slaved over hours for just feels wrong, like a waste. But I'm here to tell you that it's not, because without these bad chapters, you couldn't have found the good work inside. I put that manuscript away for months. My wings had been punctured, my little red balloon had gotten away, and I was mad at my fiance because with all of his fancy classes in postmodernism and Gothic literature and nonfiction behind him, he was telling me that the thing that I had created wasn't good enough. He just didn't get it, I thought, forgetting that if he didn't get it, neither would my readers. I was mad because he was right, and I wasn't ready for the battle of rewriting, revising, editing, and proofreading to make the thing that I had created as good as it could be. It wasn't that it wasn't good enough. It was that I had shown him a first draft, and I was too tired from writing it to admit that it wasn't good enough for me, yet. 3 years later, I published a completely rewritten version of that first story. The biggest change, aside from cutting the whole bunch of character X wakes up from dream sequences that Kyle was right were horribly cliched and boring, was the introduction of a new character. My mortal adult Jason Livingstone had been nothing but a one-line part in the first draft, but he was the glue that I needed to tie the tale together. Jason is on the cover of the 4th novel in the Olympia Heights series, and he's a favorite character for so many of my readers, to the point that I started getting vaguely veiled death threats if I split him up from his love interest. He's the character that tends to evoke the strongest emotional response from my readers, and I would have never developed him had I put my foot down and ignored everything that my first beta reader had said. Just last week, author Jenny Trout published a blog collecting her experiences as an editor with the experiences of some of her peers. They told horror stories about bad authors who fought against edits. One quote really stuck out. The editor said, "There are those authors who complain that the reason edits were so bad was because the editor doesn't like the genre or doesn't understand the stories." Well, I got news for those authors. If your editor doesn't understand what you're trying to say, then chances are your audience won't either. And that goes the same for your English paper. If somebody reading it and critiquing it doesn't get it, then your teacher's not going to get it. Writing a story that makes sense is kind of the bare minimum. Your readers aren't in your head, so you have to communicate what's in there effectively. And that's the thing about art. Great artists are never alone. My mother-in-law, Terry Strickland, is a talented realist painter. She makes a full-time living off of painting and teaching. And every time we go over, if there's a painting on her easel, everyone goes down to the studio and takes a look. We have this kind of contract in our family that we're not going to get hurt when somebody tells us we need to change something. We look at her reference images and we all point out problems, every one of her kids and kids-in-law. She might groan with frustration because moving an eye just a half a centimeter to the left means repainting the entire eye, but she does it because she's a professional and that's what professionals do. This quality is not just a virtue for artists. As a teaching candidate, part of the process towards getting your certification is interning with a supervising teacher who watches your lessons and gives you feedback to incorporate. Every facet of life can be improved if we listen to the opinions of others and try to make ourselves better. We can't always see our own flaws because we live with them every day. Human self-preservation stops us from identifying what we need to work on. The best way to grow is to honestly look at ourselves and our work and accept our mistakes. We cannot become better versions of ourselves by sticking our fingers in our ears and pretending that we are already perfect. Of course, it's also a worthwhile skill to learn when to recognize when people are truly being helpful and when they're just trying to tear you down. There are a lot of strangers on the internet who say hurtful things for fun because they don't see you as a human being. You're impersonal halfway across the world on the other side of that keyboard, and it's really easy to take your humanity for granted. Learning to recognize when someone is giving an honest review of your work and when someone is posting a snarky, gift-filled rant for attention will save you a lot of heartache. Not everyone is going to like what you do, whether you write a book or run for public office or post do-it-yourself home design projects on Pinterest. You cannot please everyone, nor should you have to. It's valuable to be able to recognize repeated criticisms as legitimate complaints, but if more than one person finds your writing to be confusing or the ending to be abrupt, maybe they have a point. It's just as valuable to recognize when someone is being contrary to get clicks, or when they are trying to tear down perceived competition, or when they are just trolling. Recognizing the distinction between constructive and destructive criticism will let you know when to internalize that feedback and when to close the browser and walk away. We are a rough draft, but every revision is a chance to come closer to our ideal selves. At some point, you stop editing your draft and you just publish it. The work is never perfect, and it's never completely done. But we owe it to ourselves to move beyond that first draft, to reach out to the community of supportive friends and family, and let them help us. You can ask for help, and you can become the best possible version of yourself, or you can go it alone and make everything harder than it needs to be. Don't let your ego stop you from becoming great.